So here we have the Space Invaders engine. As you can see right here, we have the Azul, that's sprite objects I've created. There is many invaders, probably about 10 of them. As you can see, we have Invader 1, Invader 1 underscore 2 through 6 are all in the same row. 2 and 3 are obviously in a different row. 3 underscore 2 is right next to 3 and is moving in the same row as 3. We have Invader 4 on its own. We also have an explosion, which is dynamically increasing and decreasing in size and spinning around the screen. We have bullet 1 and 2, which are bullets moving on the side of the screen, up and down the y-axis. Bullet 3 is coming from the spaceship, which is the next sprite object, which is also dynamically increasing and decreasing in size. Bullet 3 is going up to the start of the first Space Invader row, which I believe is Space Invaders 3, and it stops right there, which is about at the 350 point on the y-axis. And then we also have a sprite box created called a rectangle, which is actually a dead center of the video picture of the environment I've created, and it is dynamically spinning and increasing in size, which kind of creates like kind of creepy looking star geometric figure in the middle of the screen. The Invader 1 through 4 speed is kind of what controls the speed or the change of pace for each invader on the screen. The explosion speed is what moves the explosion. I believe it also is the speed at which it is expanding. Bullet 1 through 3 speed is the speed of the bullets. Explosion, pause X, pause Y, and explosion angle. Obviously, the explosion angle is what is used to dictate what angle the figure is at when it is being displayed on the screen. It helps with the rotation. Pause X and pause Y are temporary variable placeholders to help enlarge the size of the explosion. I believe it is using the dot as a placeholder for the .sx and .sy variables for the explosion. Same thing for the spaceship. Pause X, pause Y are placeholders for the .sx and .sy variables of the spaceship. The rectangle angle is also used to help move it, or help give off the spinning movement of the rectangle in the middle of the screen. The rectangle speed, obviously, is moving very slowly, so it's kind of like a pulsating geometric figure in the middle of the screen. I've saved the examples just to reference for future use and to kind of help me out when I lose count. The actual variable int count was used to have a running tally of the seconds that is going on within the program, and is actually used by the rectangle to change colors. As the count increases, I believe it hits 100, change color, 200, change color, 300, change color, and then goes back to the original color. Here's where we set up the window name, Sprite City I have it, the width and the height, 1000 by 800. We set the color, a little bit of red, a little less blue, and a little bit more, or a little less green, and a little bit more blue. Load content. We also have the kind of Azul engine calling a texture object, which is actually the sprite sheet I use. Until the Invader's sprite sheet is in the reference directory of this project. This is basically just setting it up so it can be used down here where we actually create the sprites. So as you can see, all of them are very similar and they're all coming off the same Invader sprite sheet. Invader 1, for example, we call it new Azul.sprite. Here's the parameters. It's called from the invader sprite sheet. We call new Azul.rect. So on the sprite sheet, it is actually the first image on the sprite sheet. So we have 0 on the x-axis, 0 on the y-axis, and then it's going to pull the image 128 over on the x-axis and 85 down on the y-axis. So it creates that little rectangle right there, and that's the first image on the box. We place it over at the 100 axis on our own rectangle for the program for Sprite City, and 600 up on the Y. It's actually starting on the bottom of our program and going up, so it's the opposite of what it is on the sprite sheet. And our height and width are both 100 by 100, and that's going to be the same for all the invaders and even a couple of the other figures, I believe. So as you can see a lot of them have very similar setup. Explosion's a little bit different. Actually, not the explosion, the bullets are a little bit different. We changed the size of them here. And I also, through GIMP, I made my own rectangle to kind of get more accurate pull of them, because they're clearly not the same size as the rest of the objects. They're a little bit smaller. So I put them 40 by 45 on X and Y axis. So leaving the sprites, here's some more examples that were given, kind of base those off of. Here's the update method. I added my own logic based off of some of the given examples to kind of do similar things. I think the biggest thing I found out through this was Invader 1, I was able to get kind of a working row of Space Invaders, which seems like that's what we're going to need in a somewhat similar manner for the actual game. And it's somewhat simple logic. You just have to take the one furthest right, make sure that doesn't hit the farthest point, and then the one furthest left, make sure that doesn't hit the smallest point that you don't want to hit. You're going to increase all of them by -1, change their direction. So you can see it there. You're going to update all of them. Invader 2 is similar. All the invaders are kind of similar. We're just changing directions. The explosion, we've got twisting, turning, expanding, doing pretty much everything. So we got the angle changing here. So the angle is constantly moving at 0.2 of floating number. We have the X, we got it getting wider until it hits 800 width. Then that's when we drop back down to 0. When it hits 0.5 height, we drop down to 0. Or no, we're increasing by 0.5 on the height, and when it hits 600 total of the height, we drop back down to 0. Kind of what creates a pulsating effect. Here's where we set their X and Y parameters to pos X and pos Y. The angle is set to the explosion angle, where we have constantly increasing. Actually here, .sx and .sy is where we have it kind of pulsating, getting bigger and smaller. And if it hits those parameters where it gets bigger than 7 float on the width, we switch it back to shrink. And if it gets smaller than 1.0 on the height, we have it switching around to get a little bit bigger. The ones up above, which I'm talking about, were actually what helps make it move, and it's kind of scanning the X and Y axis through those, actually. The bullets are similar to the Space Invaders. They're just moving vertically instead of horizontally. We're changing up the speed that it crawls along the y-axis at. And then bullet 3 just has kind of like a stop in place at 350, and that's where the first row of the Space Invader starts. The spaceship is also pulsating, dynamically increasing. So if it ever gets wider than 5F, it goes in another direction. If it gets bigger than 1FY, or if it decreases to 1FY, it also goes in the other direction and gets a little bit bigger. And you're adding to these according to the speed. That's what sets how big it's going to expand and contract. Update that, obviously, and here's the count plus plus. So it's essentially counting every second. This is the rectangle. It's moving according to that. That's how the colors are dictated. So every 300 seconds, the count is going to be reset. You go through another rotation of the rectangle's colors. After that, let's see, we got more examples of what was given to the class. Here is the final method, I believe, where we render all the sprites so they appear on the screen originally before the updates. And that is about it. That is all we've got right now. It's pretty cool. And I'm going to hit start so we can get a little example of what I just discussed. So here you go. I'm moving the screen. Here's the pulsating spaceship. Here's the explosion that's swirling. Here's the rectangle that kind of turned into a geometric figure. Both sides you have the bullets. You have the bullet coming out of the spaceship, which stops right at the first row of the Space Invaders. You have a whole row of 6 Space Invaders, which kind of mimics what the game will look like to a certain extent. And then you have the other Space Invaders kind of filling in. And that is about it. Thank you.